Once upon a time, there was a couple named Bright, and Sandra had been married for 5 years, and every year felt like a lifetime. They had everything they needed: a cozy home, stable jobs, and a love that most people only dream of. But there was one thing missing, something they had prayed for endlessly: a child. The days were long, and the nights even longer, filled with silent prayers and hopeful dreams. Every month brought with it a wave of disappointment, and every holiday season felt incomplete. Then, one day, the miracle they had been waiting for finally happened. Sandra's eyes welled up with tears as the doctor told her the news: she was pregnant. The months that followed were filled with a mix of fear and excitement. They prepared their home, their hearts, and every detail for the arrival of their little one. When Naomi was born, it was as if the whole world had stopped. Bright held her tiny hand, and in that moment, all the struggles, all the pain, faded away. She was their miracle, their long-awaited joy. The couple was overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for Naomi, but for the journey that led to her. Every sleepless night, every tear shed was worth it. They looked at her and saw not just a baby, but a promise fulfilled. Life was finally complete. Life settled into a routine, the kind that brings comfort after years of uncertainty. Naomi grew, and with every milestone, Bright and Sandra felt their hearts swell with pride. She was the light of their lives, and every evening they would sit by her crib, watching her sleep peacefully, reminiscing about the years before she was born. It was a peaceful existence, one that they cherished deeply. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One day, a day that started like any other, Bright found himself caught up at work. It was one of those days where time seemed to slip through his fingers. He was so engrossed in his tasks that he lost track of time, completely forgetting that he was supposed to pick Naomi up from school. Meanwhile, Sandra, who had been waiting at home, started to worry. It wasn't like Bright to be late, especially when it came to Naomi. She tried to call him, but there was no answer. Panic began to set in. Sandra decided she couldn't wait any longer. She grabbed her keys and headed out the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Something didn't feel right. Sandra's drive to Naomi's school was anything but smooth. Traffic was terrible, as if the universe itself was conspiring against her. Every red light felt like an eternity, and her anxiety grew with each passing second. Then, to make matters worse, she realized she had lost her purse. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, and she could feel the tears welling up. But she couldn't afford to break down now. Naomi needed her. At the same time, Naomi, tired of waiting, made a decision that would change everything. She decided to walk home. She was a smart girl, and the route wasn't unfamiliar. But as she walked, she realized she had left her lunchbox at school. In a moment of childlike innocence, she turned back to get it, not noticing the speeding car heading her way. The sound of the collision was deafening. Naomi's small body was thrown onto the road, her lunchbox scattered beside her. The driver, a man named David, slammed on the brakes and rushed out of the car, his heart racing with fear. He knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he checked her pulse. She was alive, but barely. Without a second thought, he picked her up and rushed to the nearest hospital, praying she would survive. The hospital was chaotic, the kind of place where fear hangs in the air. David's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He had hit a child, and now her life was in his hands. The doctors took Naomi into surgery immediately, but the situation was critical. They didn't have the necessary equipment to treat her properly, and every second that passed felt like a lifetime. Meanwhile, Sandra and Bright were frantically searching for their daughter. They went from one hospital to another, their hope dwindling with each dead end. They didn't know where she was or what had happened. All they knew was that something was terribly wrong. Finally, they reached the hospital where Naomi had been taken. The doctor's words were like a punch to the gut. Naomi had been in a serious accident, and her condition was critical. She needed immediate surgery, but the hospital couldn't perform it. Sandra's knees buckled, and Bright had to hold her up. The world around them blurred as they tried to process the nightmare they were living. David, desperate to save Naomi's life, made a split-second decision. He knew of a better hospital in another city, one that had the equipment Naomi needed. Without informing her parents, he arranged for her transfer. It was a risky move, but it was her only chance. The ambulance sped through the night, sirens blaring as they raced against time. Back at the hospital, Sandra and Bright were inconsolable. The thought of losing Naomi was unbearable. Sandra, overwhelmed by grief, collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Bright, trying to stay strong, held her close, but his heart was breaking too. They had waited so long for Naomi, and now they might lose her. But even in the darkest moments, there was a sliver of hope. They clung to the possibility that Naomi would survive, that she would come back to them. They prayed, not for a miracle, but for the strength to keep going, to keep believing that they would see their daughter again. And somewhere, deep down, they knew that as long as they had hope, they had a chance. Conclusion: the story you've just heard is one of love, loss, and the unbreakable bond between parents and their child. It's a journey through the highs and lows of life, where joy and pain walk hand in hand. As you reflect on Bright and Sandra's story, remember that hope is a powerful thing. It can carry you through the darkest times and lead you to the light at the end of the tunnel. If you were moved by this story, please consider supporting us by subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing you stories that touch the heart and soul. And if you want to hear more, check out our previous videos from the end screen. Thank you for watching.